Kia ora whānau, my name is Suzy Taylor and this is my submission to the Mental Health Inquiry Panel. I'm really excited about this new government. There's a panel of 6 people travelling around the country right now, taking submissions from anyone and everyone. So if anyone's watching this and you've got something to say, they want to know what is working and what isn't working, and suggestions that you can put forward to improve our mental health system. So just Google Mental Health Inquiry and their website comes up and you can put a submission through via email. So please do so. So I just want to introduce myself. My name is Suzy Taylor. I live in Nongataha in Rotorua. I'm currently a student at Bethlehem Tertiary Institute in Tauranga doing a Bachelor of Counselling. I have lived experience of suicide, and suicide is what I want to talk about within our mental health system and inquiries into making things better. My experience of suicide spans across 25 years. Some of you may know this, I've already spoken about it on social media. My former husband, Lance Taylor, took his own life when he was 23. Our daughter, Stacey Taylor, was 7 years old at the time. My best friend, Caroline Keeley, took her own life 17 years ago. And just shy of 2 years ago, I suffered the worst loss of all when my daughter, Georgia Macbeth, died by suicide. And she was 19, and her age is within the high risk group within our young ones in Aotearoa. Her death has brought me to my knees. Her death continues to bring me to my knees, and this is my submission in honour of her, because there's a whole lot of things that need to change. So what I want to start with first is what I call front end big picture stuff, and this is stuff that I believe we can adopt, and they are ways of preventing our young ones and our adults from feeling vulnerable in the first place, from preventing them from not wanting to live anymore or not have any kind of hope. So the first thing I want to talk about is our environment, and Professor Sir Mason Jury, you're on the board. I hope, Jemima, that you are going to show this to the whole panel. You talked about this up at Waitangi a couple of weeks ago, and that we need to clean up our environment because a healthy environment creates a healthy mind. So we need to put in place affordable housing, safe and warm housing, eradicate child poverty. All of these things moves towards suicide prevention. The other thing we need to do is look overseas at stuff that's working and adopt it and bring it back here. And I've mentioned it before on social media. I want to go to Iceland and meet the 3 people that started the Icelandic model, because 35 other cities in Europe have adopted this model. And it's basically in the early 90s, 40% of teenagers were indulging in drugs and alcohol, all of those things that we don't want our teenagers doing. And over a 20-year period, that 40% has dropped to 2%. And they've done a whole raft of stuff, which I won't go into today. If you're interested, Google it and have a look yourself. The other thing I want to talk about is education. We need to start educating our children at a really young age, primary school, about resilience, how to cope with loss and change, how to deal with broken relationships. We need to infiltrate this into all of our education, our primary and secondary schooling system, instead of learning stuff like hey diddle diddle and Shakespeare, you know. So those are things that I think we can put in place now. I want to talk quickly about our emergency response services, which are police, paramedics, and particularly firemen. These guys are on the front line. They deal with a whole lot of ugliness on a daily basis, and sorry for being so graphic, whānau, but we are talking about saving lives here. They are scraping bodies off the road after car accidents. They are trying to do CPR on people who have tried to take their own life and hadn't succeeded. So I think we need to bring in mandatory counselling hours for all of these employees and all of these response services. Now, maybe something like on a monthly basis to start with. Each staff member has to attend a face-to-face, one-on-one counselling session, so that when they're out there in that ugliness and they are experiencing stuff, they can think in their mind, oh, next Tuesday I can go and unload this to a counsellor, or, in a fortnight from now. Because what's happening now is counselling is an option for these first respondents, and a lot of them don't access it because it's deemed sissy and cowardly, and people get teased about it. So if we infiltrate it across the board, I believe this will reduce our suicide rates as well, because firemen in particular, paramedics, police, and prison wardens are taking their own lives. You've asked for what's working well. Not much, but what has worked well for me is the nurses. The accident and emergency staff here in Rotorua Hospital have been amazing. So for goodness sake, please give them their pay rise. I have a couple of suggestions about where the funding's going to come from for this compulsory counselling offered to our first respondent staff, and to give our nurses a pay rise. I know this is your fella's job, but I'll tell you. We currently offer previous ministers, people like John Key, who's out playing golf now, an allowance of free travel and other stuff, which he can access if he wants, and it's offered to other ministers as well. Now, John Key is a multi-millionaire. He has a wealth of in excess of $50 million. That's public knowledge. He does not need that, and neither do the other ministers. So take that away and give it to our much-deserved nurses. The other thing I think we can save money on is our prison systems. So if we look at Ireland, who has a similar population number to us, it's 4-point-something million, their incarceration numbers are 5,000. Here in New Zealand, with our 4.2 million, I think it is, population, we have an incarceration number of 10,000. So I went to Northland Regional Prison recently, and this is all suicide prevention, whānau, please listen, to visit a whānau member up at the prison in Kaikohi. And I was standing next to a lady who I started to ask her who she was visiting. Now, this lady's in her 60s, and she was visiting her husband, who is 64. Now, he was caught with 12 dope plants, and he admitted they were for his personal use because he suffers from depression and suicidal ideology. Now, because this 64-year-old man had a conviction 35 years ago, he was locked up in remand. And for 7 months, his wife couldn't see him. And when I asked her why, she said, I don't know. And then he went for sentencing, and he was sentenced to 22 months in prison for 12 dope plants. And he couldn't attribute the 7 months that he had already done because 35 years ago he had a conviction. So this man is spending 29 months in jail at a cost to the taxpayer of $250,000. Now, this is a victimless crime. He would have been better off doing community service, and we can use money for those idiotic decisions that the judges make and give it towards our much-needed nurses. I hope I'm making sense, whānau, because we've got to get smart about this. People are dying. Okay, so the other thing I want to talk about is suicide attempts. So we all know that there are thousands of suicide attempts a year, and a lot of them result in our vulnerable ending up in accident and emergency. Now, it's at that point that's critical, because I have had first-hand experience of suicide attempts over 25 years, many, many times. And the mental health system is the same as it was 25 years ago, and it's got to change. We need an advocate in there, someone who understands and knows and can be the conduit between the staff and the parents, or the brothers of or sisters of someone who has tried to take their own life. Because when someone attempts suicide, there's a 60-fold chance they will do it again. So understand that they are highly likely to do it again rather than not do it again. I want to talk about my T-shirt. I was one of the minions last year to push for a mental health inquiry, because we can see what's wrong here. I have colleagues who have lost children to whakamomori, which is suicide, who have been in state institutions. Now, I'm not going to talk about that, but I hope that these mothers come forward. I'm sure you will, because there's a whole lot wrong in there, and there's institutions where they're getting misdiagnosed, therefore the wrong medication, therefore they're not doing their job properly. I want to talk about a sometimes taboo subject of intergenerational trauma through colonisation. Now, what I would like to say is that it exists. I see it. I sat across the table 2 weeks ago talking to a man who's not much older than me, and he was raised by his grandparents who could only speak Māori, and this man, as a 5-year-old boy, went to school and was strapped for speaking the only language he knew how to speak. I have sat with many people who have been in and out of boys' homes and girls' homes, and these operated over a 50-year period where they were physically and sexually abused again and again by many, many perpetrators, staff and other people that were staying there. And then they progressed on to prison, and no wonder we have gangs, whānau. I mean, mongrel mob and black power, I believe, are probably results of the treatment of these young Māori men who weren't looked after, these boys. Now, I don't really have much to say about gangs because I don't feel qualified enough, but it's not rocket science to work out that there's a system that's been in place to fail our Indigenous people. And when we recognise that and understand that and acknowledge that, this is not about blame, this is about moving forward, we can then start acknowledging and addressing what is going on and move forward as a nation. Don Brash, your Hobson's Pledge, you need to understand first that there is no Māori privilege, because I don't see any Māori privilege with the 50% Māori taking up our prisons. I don't see any Māori privilege for those young men that had to come through those boys' homes and girls' homes with their messed up heads and their messed up bodies that someone else did to them. So whānau, please just understand that we all need to be on the same page about this with mental health. And there's a whole lot of people who are vulnerable, who have mental health issues, and we need to be kind. We need to deliver up a whole lot of kindness. So I want to thank you, Jemima, for presenting me with a portal to send this submission into, and please let the other panel see this, because I'm going to be putting it on a couple of social media platforms, because we've got to keep you guys true, we've got to keep you guys honest and make sure you're doing the best job you possibly can. All right, thank you for tuning in, whānau, thank you for listening. Ka kite.